He retired after 22 years in, I believe, 2004. He'll correct me on any mistakes I make, I'm sure. Taught high school for a year, went back as a civilian advisor to Afghanistan, and then they decided that he was going to run for Congress. And as a proud conservative, no-nonsense approach, he was able to get a lot of support, a lot of money, and was able to get elected. And it's primarily due to all his background. Small Business Committee, on the Armed Services Committee. He's a part of the Republican Study Committee, which, as you know, a few years ago, our Congressman Tom Price was chair of the Republican Study Committee. If I had to get into all the honors that he's won, the Bronze Star and the Meritorious Service Awards and that stuff, we might be here a long time. But let me, he's proud to introduce Congressman Price.
Thank you so much for taking the time out of your Sunday to come out and allow me to share some insights and perspectives with you. It is really, truly a great honor to be back in my hometown of Atlanta, Georgia. As a matter of fact, we're staying over there at the Marriott at Ashford Dunwoody in 285, and I did a couple of years down at Marist School, my 8th grade and 9th grade year. So it was nice to wake up this morning and run back down what we used to call Cardiac Hill, and just run along the track. It really brought things back home for me. Because when you look at who I am, it is truly a shock for a lot of people to be a young black conservative that was brought up in the inner city. But that is how things are changing. And look at how this room is packed full of Jewish Republicans, conservatives. This is a pretty special day. I also want to thank the general back here who actually served with my mother up at the 6th Marine Corps District headquarters, which was located down in Piedmont and Auburn Avenue and also Peachtree Street. So serve, Semper Fi, hoorah, and appreciate you being here as well. I think everyone knows what the preeminent thing is on all of our minds today. And I sit on the Armed Services Committee, so probably what I want to talk about is the security threat that we see facing Israel, but also that exact same threat faces the United States of America. And I want to read to you the statement that I sent out after hearing about the gentleman who won the elections in Egypt. A year ago, there were those of us who warned the Obama administration of a Muslim Brotherhood takeover in Egypt. We were castigated as alarmists and loose cannons. Today, our predictions have come to reality, and the ominous specter reminding us of the Iranian Revolution is evident. The Muslim Brotherhood once claimed they would not run a presidential candidate. Truly, the Arab Spring is nothing more than a radical Islamist nightmare. Now, we need to unequivocally reiterate our support to the Coptic Christians and Israel. What an incredible foreign policy faux pas by the second coming of Jimmy Carter, the Obama administration. I call upon President Obama to cut off American foreign aid to Egypt, denounce the results of this election, repudiate the Muslim Brotherhood and all radical Islamist political entities. That was the statement. Without a doubt, right now, right now, without a doubt, the situation in which Israel and indeed the United States finds itself is a horrible situation. Israel is a shining light. It's a beacon of liberty, freedom, and democracy in a dark sea of despots, dictators, autocrats, and theocrats. But what this administration, and that's why I compare it back to the Carter administration, the naivete has allowed Israel to be put in such a precarious position that I think for the first time since the Holocaust of World War II, we could be looking at a modern-day second Holocaust, a sincere threat to the existence of Israel. Let me break this down for you. In southern Lebanon now, United Nations Mandate 1701 which was supposed to be enforced by United Nations Intervention Force in Lebanon, Italians and I think some Spaniards, has failed. There are now 50 to 55,000 medium and long-range rockets and missiles that are in southern Lebanon, which could strike every single city in Israel from southern Lebanon. Hezbollah has complete run and control of Lebanon. The United Nations force up there no longer really goes out and does any type of patrol because the Hezbollah forces are attacking them. And the UN has not given them the requisite type of rule and engagement to fight back against them. To the south, we know exactly what is going on in the Gaza Strip with Hamas, whose charter states that they will destroy the modern-day state of Israel. Islamic Jihad, Al-Quds, and Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade. Routinely, there are rockets and missiles that are fired out of the Gaza Strip into southern Israel. I've had the opportunity to go over twice and visited Sderot, and understand, I'm from the South. If I said it wrong, it's because of my accent. But when you go and you see the children have bomb shelters at their playgrounds, when you talk to social workers there, and you start to see PTSD in elementary school age children, that should not be something that was supposed to happen. And what was the promise? What was the guarantee when Israel said that we would turn the Gaza Strip back over? That there will be peace, we'd have a willing peace partner, and look exactly what you've got. And the other concern that we have to understand is Syria. Now, a lot of people are talking about the humanitarian crisis, and let's go in there and do something in Syria. But this is the question that I always pose to people when they say, you know, Colonel, Congressman West, what's the solution? What do we do? Well, on one side in Syria, you have Bashar al-Assad. You have the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, and now you have Russia, which no doubt they are supplying. Then on the other side of Syria, we have freedom fighters who we don't know who they are. We have Al-Qaeda and we have Turkey. As a matter of fact, if you have not paid attention, there was a Turkey fighter jet that was just shot down when it went into Syrian airspace. And understand, Turkey is now taking that to NATO. Turkey, being a member of NATO, can go and invoke the NATO charter, which says if one of us are attacked, then it's an attack against all of NATO, which could draw us in on the side of radical Islamists. This is the precarious situation that we find ourselves because we don't have a definitive understanding of what is happening in that part of the world. You know, a year and a half ago, everyone was celebrating and cheering this thing called the Arab Spring. The Arab Spring is truly, as the foreign minister of Iran just sent his congratulatory note to Mohammed Morsi. He said, it's the new Islamic awakening. And when you think about what is happening all across the Maghreb, North Africa, well, what is happening in Nigeria? What is happening in East Africa with al-Shabaab and Somalia? What is happening with Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula and Yemen? You're seeing the rise of a radical Islamic state that is trying to dethrone all of these secular governments, which if you understand their mentality, they thought, they don't believe in secular government. They believe in one empire, one entity, one caliphate that has one leader, one head, based upon the Quran. That is really what we see happening. And it's sad enough that when we have generals, such as our general here, and generals in uniform, that say, this is the situation on the ground, and this is what we need, and this is why we need it, such as General Austin, when he said we need 10 to 15,000 men and women left in Iraq as a residual force. The president disagreed with a 4-star general. I guess he has a countless amounts of military experience. And he said, you will only get 3 to 5,000. And then because of whatever reason, then it goes to 0. And if you recall when the president stood up and he made his statement about Iraq, he said one simple thing. This was the first sentence. He said, I have kept my campaign promise. We will have no troops in Iraq. Well, let me tell you what having no troops in Iraq means now. That Iran is extending its regional hegemonic dominance, and that is why you have the Iranian Revolutionary Guard forces in Syria, because Mr. al-Maliki, being Shia, is not going to tell them no, so they're freely transiting through Iraq to get into Syria. This is the short-sightedness of this administration. And that is the situation that they have created for Israel at this time. You're seeing a race for who is going to be the next hegemonic dominant power in the Islamic world. Saudi Arabia is the traditional hegemon because they have Mecca and Medina. Turkey is the last Islamic caliphate, remember the Ottoman Empire. And now you have the new kid on the block, Iran, who is marching toward getting a nuclear device, which, ladies and gentlemen, if you read their theocracy, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad is not in control. It's the Ayatollahs that are in control of Khamenei. And if they get a nuclear device, that means that it will be used for the apocalyptic event that will bring back the hidden Iman, the Mahdi, and spur on the resurgence of a new Islamic empire. That is where we are. Now, the sad thing is that there are too many people in our country and in Washington, D.C., the first and foremost, they don't read. They don't understand the adversary. And even if they do read, they do understand, they don't have the courage to say it. That is why the video that you all saw, someone comes up and starts shaking the Quran at me, I'm going to probably react kind of viscerally to that. But you have to do that based upon the truth. You have to know their history better than they do. And that is why when I told that gentleman to put the microphone down and go sit down, he did. Because he knew he had walked into a U-shaped ambush. That's the type of leadership that we have to have in the United States of America. That's the type of leadership that Benjamin Netanyahu is starving for us to have. Right now, we're living a 1930s Neville Chamberlain type of moment. We're waving a piece of paper saying that there's going to be peace in our time. We continue to believe that compromise, negotiation, and appeasement is the way that you're going to have a settlement of peace in the Middle East. That's not the case. They only understand two things. That's strength and might. We continue to talk. As a matter of fact, we had talks with the Iranians, and the Iranians said, let's have some more talks in Turkey. We had talks with the Iranians in Turkey, they said, let's have some more talks in Iraq. We had talks in Iraq, and they said, let's have some more talks a little later. But guess what they're doing all this time? They're stalling, they're developing. You know, Ambassador Bolton said, you're looking at about 3 to 4 months. Those centrifuges are continuing to turn. They're fortifying their underground facilities. They know the capability of our bunker buster munitions. And they're preparing to be able to thwart any type of action that we take. Sanctions really only work when you have a country that cares about its people. But when you have a theocracy that has a totally different goal and objective, you're not going to get them to care about the people. As a matter of fact, we saw when Ahmadinejad was elected that they were gunning down their own people in the streets. That's the level of concern that they have. So right now is without a doubt, it's that 1930s moment. If we continue to just give them and back away as we did back then, give them the Sudetenland, give them, give them a little more and believe that nothing's going to happen. We are staring at World War IV. We truly are. Because it is not just what is happening in the Middle East. It's the web that is happening with Russia, with China, with North Korea, with Venezuela. There are missile sites that are being placed in Venezuela. Missile sites which could, with medium and long-range capability, strike the district that I represent, that is Southern Florida. China is building port facilities all through our hemisphere. China controls the Panama Canal, which in 2014 is going to expand, bringing in larger cruise ships. But what do you hear as far as our military capability and capacity? We've got sequestration kicking in. $500 to $600 billion or more cuts on our military, on top of the $487 billion of cuts that we've already in place. The smallest Army and Marine Corps since 1940. The smallest Navy since 1915. The smallest Air Force since we created the modern day United States Air Force. You got men and women, maybe some of your relatives, 5 to 6 tours of duty in combat zones. Think about the stress on them, and think about also the stress on the families. And we're going to take them down. We're going to put 200,000 of our men and women in uniform on the streets, telling them, go find something else to do. At a time when 23 million Americans are underemployed, unemployed, or not even on the rolls because they're discouraged workers. Not only are we looking at a national security Armageddon, we're looking at a fiscal Armageddon. And that is why You have to be so very clear and articulate on the issues to be able to show that this president, in 3.5 years, is truly an abject failure. He's a great speech giver with a teleprompter. But he is an abject failure. And we are looking at a situation where many of our children and grandchildren, I look forward to the day when my 2 daughters can go over and visit Israel. Because being a Christian, that's your spiritual homeland. But what about those Jewish children here who want to go over for their birthright visit, want to make Aliyah? Will they be able to do that in the future if we don't get serious about the situation and the enemies that confront these 2 great beacons of freedom and liberty? Remember what the Mulsim Brotherhood's charter says. Israel is the little Satan. We're the greater Satan. And the guy who started the Mulsim Brotherhood, Sayyid Qutb, was educated in the United States of America at a university out in Colorado, just the same as this new president was educated in the United States of America. They come here, they study us, they understand why they want to hate us, and then they go back and breed that hate. This is a critical time. And I will close by saying this. Now is the time for you to gird yourselves and make a stand. It is truly, as Thomas Paine said in December 1776, that these are the times which try men's souls. When the summer soldier and the sunshine patriot will, in this crisis, shrink from their duties. We can't have them shrink away. There's too much at stake. Another 4 years with President Obama will affect this country for at least 50 years. Because you are still living on the ramifications from the Carter administration, which were only 4 years. The decision that Carter made not supporting the Shah, look what we got. Hezbollah, Hamas, the reinvigoration of radical Islamism and terrorism. What would this decision? It ended up with a Muslim Brotherhood president in Egypt, the largest Arab nation in the world. What would that mean for us in the subsequent years? So with that being said, go out there and earn the admiration of men and women, because you will have made a stand come November the 6th of 2012. It's a clear-cut choice. Either you want to maintain liberty, freedom, and democracy, or you will have a socialist, egalitarian nanny-state that will be diminished in its influence and its ability to project strength throughout the world. And whenever we do that, someone watches and they take us home. So God bless you all, and what are your questions? I'll let you pick a question. I tell you, if I could, you got some water, bottle of water, it doesn't have to be cold.
I've been want to get up and get a drink. Thank you, Bonnie.
Congressman West, I want to thank you for remaining unwavering in your conservative principles and convictions. What so many of us as Republicans, we know that it was the wave of conservative ideas that ushered in the Reagan Revolution.
Yep.
And I have a message to take back to Speaker Boehner.
Uh-oh.
He so often in his group seemed to fold like a cheap suit. And at some point,
That's a good Southern metaphor.
well, at some point, compromise becomes cowardice, and that's primarily what I see from him and others. Because why is it that we always are the ones that compromise? If we're not willing to stand true to our conservative principles, this is the last chance for us to get it right. And it's not just about the presidency; it's electing the right Republicans.
Yep, you're right. And you know what? You bring up a great point. And many people remember Judy Woodruff.
Yeah.
I do.
She used to be down here in Atlanta.
Yeah.
She was with PBS, and I had an interview with her. And she brought this thing, compromise, to me. And as I said, you know, too often liberals don't understand that I do read and I do prepare for it. And I said, Judy, it seems very odd to me that when President Obama was the president, Harry Reid had the Senate, Nancy Pelosi was there, I never heard you guys in the media say the word compromise. And she immediately pivoted away from that. And I said, no, let's talk about this. Why is it that when you have just House Republicans, all of a sudden we have to compromise? I say, you know, really, what compromise means to liberals is that you do what they say. and do what they're asked to do. But I will tell you this, that I believe, and I've seen this, I think that the speaker is now realizing that to stand up and fight, people will reward you and respect you for that. You know, because he really didn't want to do this contempt of Congress vote against Eric Holder. And there were those of us that said it's the right thing to do because people are concerned about absolutely.
Is there any ways that we can limit Muslim immigration to America?
Well, you know, I don't want to get into limiting Muslim immigration to America, but I think the critical thing that we need to do is ask the right questions. We just had an op-ed piece that was published in Investors Business Daily that talked about Sharia-compliant funding. So what we need to do is start looking at these things and asking the right questions so the American people become more evident. You know, I worked with young men, interpreters and translators in Iraq and also Afghanistan. Good young men. As a matter of fact, there was a couple of them in Afghanistan. The one kid, he had a wife and a son. He didn't want to bring his son up in Afghanistan. He really wanted to come to America. And the question that I posed to him, I said, have you ever read our Constitution? He said, I have not. I said, I will not support you to come to America until you read the Constitution and you understand what the Constitution of this country is. And if you come to America, you will be willing to uphold that Constitution. And he came back, and he not only read the Constitution, he read the Declaration, he read the Federalist Papers, he was all over. And I got him a green card so he could bring his family over. He lives up in New York. You know, the thing is that there are people that want what we have to offer. There are voices in the Islamic world that are willing to stand up. But we're not showing them our willingness to stand up with them. And so nobody over there wants to wake up with their head in their lap. And so I think that we have to be very receptive to people that come to the United States of America. When you come to the United States of America, it's about our Constitution. You know, you start talking about Sharia law. We got to say, that's it. And I think that when we make that force right statement of commitment, you know, people came to America to be part of America. And it's not just Muslims, it's all the individuals that are immigrating to America. We must get them to understand your culture is important to retain. But there's an American culture we want you to be a part of. And right now, what I see happening, what I really see happening is a balkanizing of America. You know, because people are looking how they can make political gain. So that's my bigger strategic concern. At the tactical level, we got to secure our borders because people are coming in here. You got Islamic terrorist training camps in Georgia. Y'all know that?
Where?
Down around Macon. That's one of them. But you got Islamic terrorist training camps. And what they do, they declare freedom of religion. So that no one goes into. In New York, there's a place called Islamburg. Okay? Northern Virginia. Northern Virginia is very bad. Al-Awlaki and all of these guys. Read the exploratory memorandum that was discovered in 1991 in the basement of a house in Northern Virginia by the FBI. And it outlined the Mulsim Brotherhood strategic objective for the United States of America. That's what we have to be able to confront. And you can't be afraid to call it, because if not, we'll start to infiltrate. The United States Army War College instructor was just fired, relieved of his duties, because he dared to say that we are in a fight against Islam. Okay? Department of Defense and the FBI are having training manuals censored because there are Muslim Brotherhood infiltrators that are going and they have influence in the Department of Defense and the Department of Justice. That's what we have to do. That's what we have to do. And look, folks, this is what is happening in our country. It's kind of like, how many people saw the movie The Matrix? Okay, remember The Matrix? We were out there, everyone was living in the perfect world and everything like that, but really, it was a facade. It was a computer-generated world. Sometimes when I'm walking around or whatever, I just look and say, do people really know what is going on in the United States of America? I mean, some of them need to take the little blue pill and get on board. Now, there are some people that I don't think could take it. Those are people that will buy them.
Colonel West, thank you for your military service, first of all.
It's an honor.
Second of all, things are moving very rapidly. I want to move a little closer to home. Well, everyone here is talking about ideological purity. Our president swept the carpets from underneath us by giving immunity to 800,000 immigrants who are under 30 years old. I've taken the idea of a Republican, Marco Rubio, and turned it around to hammer us in the head. I'm not really into ideological purity, I'm into winning. I think a 0.7% Alan West is better than 100% Obama, to be quite honest with you. So I don't want to talk about ideological purity, but I'm going to tell you this week you're going to be getting 2 gifts. And I want to know what you're going to do, and you and your 60 freshman brethren are going to do, when the Supreme Court either turns down all or part of the health care law, and the Supreme Court says all or portions of the Arizona, Georgia, South Carolina, Alabama, et al. Immigration laws. When the Supreme Court says that showing your picture ID is as American as apple pie when you want to vote.
Yep.
I want to know what you and your 60 brethren are going to do besides say hallelujah. I want to know what you're going to offer, because the people of America, you unanimously want 26-year-olds on their parents' insurance. Sure. They want the pre-existing, then everything else be worked out. So what are you doing? Well, you have legislation ready to go. Are you ready to go? Because things are going to catch up with you really quickly.
Of course. Well, let me tell you what we're not going to do. We're not going to go and create 2,700-page legislation and then ram it down the throat. All right. I'll tell you about the picture ID thing, and this is something I said on an interview. I find it very ironic and odd that the Democrat Party came out and said that you will not be allowed into their convention in Charlotte without a picture ID. But this is the key thing. There are 3 different courses of action. The Supreme Court can say that everything's hunky-dory, and they leave it in place. And even if they do that, I think that is also a good momentum builder, because the American people see that the only way that we can get rid of this thing, which is going to be an onerous economic burden and also a devastating effect on health, is to get rid of this administration. So don't think that that is going to be a bad thing in and of itself. I think that could be a momentum boost. The second thing is the individual mandate. If the individual mandate is just ruled unconstitutional, and the thing is, the individual mandate, when you study and look at the Commerce Clause, which says that the federal government can regulate commerce, which means trade, between the with other nations, with the several states, and with the tribal nations. The problem is this: if the federal government now can be allowed to enact a commerce or trade relationship with an individual citizen in order to regulate it, then what is next? And so I don't think that any way possible you can say that the individual mandate is constitutional. Now, that is the centerpiece funding mechanism for the Patient Protection Affordable Care Act. Now, there was no severability clause. In their rush to get it passed, they did not have a severability clause, so that if one part is ruled unconstitutional, the whole thing could be ruled unconstitutional. Now, whether or not the Supreme Court will take it to that, we don't know. But this is what we plan on doing. The first thing is, if it's scenario 2 or scenario 3, which there's some aspect of unconstitutionality, we will vote to have this entire legislation, and we did this already, repealed. And then we will piece by piece start to look at free market type of solutions, catastrophic litigation, tort reform. Texas, California, Mississippi, those states instituted tort reform. Where the federal government has an effect on health care, we will try to institute tort reform to help lower the cost. Opening up insurance competition so that you don't have state-by-state many monopolies. We want to go and look at how the health savings accounts and flexible spending accounts, which the Affordable Care Act taxes, we want to open that up. You know, if you want to keep your child on your insurance at 26, so be it. We don't want to have any adverse effects for Medicare with the donut hole, so that'll be retained. And no one should be denied because of pre-existing conditions. So those things we will keep. But you could probably fit that in 15 to 20 pages. It's the other 2,680 pages that have to go, 159 government agencies, 16,000 new IRS agents, 20 new taxes or hikes. How many people knew this? They're the ones that nationalized college tuition loans in the Affordable Care Act. Okay? So this whole made-up argument about the Republicans want to punish college students, that's in the Affordable Care Act. And they took it from 3.4 to 6.8%. We voted already to keep it stable at 3.4% for, another year. So those are the type of things that we will start peeling the onion back, being in Georgia with my dahlias, we'll start peeling the onion back and making sure we do this right instead of rushing into it. The speaker sent out a great memo to all of us who got on the BlackBerry. He said there will be no dancing in the end zone, no spiking of the ball. You're going to show seriousness about what we need to do to now truly replace this onerous piece of legislation. Remember, Nancy Pelosi said, we have to pass the bill in order to find the Senate. Now that we have been passed, now we know. $940 billion, that's what they said. It's been revised to $1.7 trillion. That's the cost. If the individual mandate falls out, which is the funding mechanism, then what will the cost be? So that's what we're going to do in attacking. As far as the immigration aspect, the big thing, Steve King, I always talk about bringing a lawsuit against the president because this is really, truthfully, you can't rule this country by verbal edict. Or you can't change policy just by coming out and making a statement at the rules court. There's a legislative process, and the executive branch must understand separation of powers. They must understand representative government, and I don't think the president does. In July of 2011 and September 2011, he gave speeches to Latino groups that said, I cannot do what he just did last Friday. I don't have the power and authority to do it. But what has changed?
Because we're a nation of laws.
So I think when it comes to the immigration thing, nobody wants to take a young kid and say, you got to get out of this country. But there's a process in place by which you can apply for a deferral. But you can't make a blanket policy. How's that going to affect our employment situation? How's that going to affect, our economic situation? I was on with Geraldo Rivera on a radio interview, and I said, Geraldo, what if this person that just got a work permit goes out and works for 2 months and then they decide to quit? Are they going to get unemployment benefits? He said, well, I don't know. I can't answer that. I said, that's my point. If the legislation had been brought up through committee, been debated, been amended, voted out of committee, then brought to the House floor on an open rule, we would be able to answer those questions. What if the president all of a sudden in October says, these really good, young, patriotic Americans, I think they should also be able to participate in our electoral process. What keeps that from happening? What keeps that 18 or 19-year-old from saying, my legal parents, I want them to be legal too, and I want to sign with them? I mean, is there any means by which we preclude that from happening? So the devil's in those details, and we will take that appropriately after we find out what happens with this Arizona law.
What's our plan to lessen the impact of the Bush era tax cuts that are scheduled to expire?
This is a very big thing. We call it tax Mageddon. Understand there are 6 different tax brackets out there, and every single one of those tax brackets will see an increase of about 4 to 5%, except for the 15% tax bracket. The top 2 brackets are 33%. Will go to 37%. The top bracket, which is at 35%, will go to 39.6%. Capital gains tax will go from 15% to 25%. Dividends taxes will go from 15% to 43.4%. The death tax, which is currently at a 35% tax bracket, will go to a 55% tax bracket. The minimum exemption level will go from $5 million down to $1 million. It will be the largest tax increase that the United States of America has ever seen. And it's not going to pay down our debt deficit. It's going for one thing, to grow a bigger government. So you have a philosophical difference in America right now. Remember what I said, constitutional republic or socialist egalitarian United States. That's the choice that the American people are going to have to make. Now, it's going to really depend upon what happens on 6 November. Because if on 7 November you wake up and you find out that the Republicans have kept control of the House, they've won the Senate, and they've won the White House, you have another side that will be discouraged. And that means in the lame duck session, we can start doing the things and instituting the right type of tax reforms. Like what we said, go from 6 tax brackets to 2, 25 and 10%, reduce the amount of exemptions down to, at maximum 3, mortgage interest tax deduction,